Hi, everyone. So nice to see everybody again. Hi, Karen. Hi, Rachel. We're going to get started in a minute. I know some folks are probably trickling in, and I know there's some parent-teacher conferences and things happening across the state right now. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. We're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully everyone else can join us in. Laura, that's exciting. It's always good when a staff meeting gets over quickly. It's always a bummer to me when somebody's sitting there and decides to ask a bunch of questions, and you're like, we could get out 15 minutes early, just shh. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you are just joining us for the first time, this is part of a series. And so far we started with like the big changes, and then we funneled into the content standards themselves. Last time we looked at the practice standards, and now we're kind of pivoting to some more special topics. These topics sessions were brought up in questions from the registration forms, and then also questions we get around the state a lot. So today we're going to focus on some shifting in language in the content standards where we used to have fluency and now we have flexibly, accurately, and efficiently, or we have some use of strategic applications, some transference of knowledge, and I'm forgetting the other piece right now, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So we're going to kind of focus today's discussion around that concept of like what is fluency in the standards and how does that look in our instruction that we use in the class and what are the expectations for that. So that's the focus. But if you missed any of those other sessions and you want to access them, the recordings are available on the Math Revision website, which my team will be dropping in the chat in just a moment. So like I said, our objectives today, we want to focus on that reasoning and why we shifted some of the language. And by we, I mean the task force. I wasn't actually a member of that task force, but they shifted the language. And then we also want to learn how to differentiate between the different components of mathematics fluency as NCTM defines them. And we're going to focus specifically on flexibly, accuracy, and efficiency today. And then we're going to kind of plan some different ways that we can respond to that in the classroom. As always, we have some resources available. So there's a Google Drive for the whole series. There's a drive for every single session within there. There's a slide deck that we have. The participant handout has some important things from the slide deck today. And it also has a bunch of resources that you might want as you go do this work in your own schools. But you don't have to use that. It's just a resource available for you. And then, as I mentioned before, there's that Math Revision website where you can find every resource we have in addition to the previous recordings for this series. No problem, Laura. Good luck with that. Give them the teacher look. If you are joining us again for the first time, then I also want to mention that we really value feedback. I do take a look at those and then I integrate what people say into the sessions. I love it when there's questions in there that we need to follow up on or suggestions for improving these to make sure that they stay relevant. There's also some professional development requirements that I have to comply with. And in order to comply with those, I ask that you check in when we have our official check-in, that you keep your camera on if you can. Most of you have them on, so thank you for that. It helps us build community. And then you will have to complete the evaluation survey at the end of this. So we're going to do a quick little check. Some people last time were able to share. Ashley joined us and she shared what was going on in her school, what was working well, and some barriers that she was running in. And I was hoping that maybe someone might feel comfortable to either share in the chat or come off of mute and we can kind of discuss and celebrate wins and maybe even overcome some challenges if anyone's comfortable with that. No problem, Stephanie. Thanks for letting us know.
mind sharing kind of what's been going well this year for me, I guess. Um, this is my third year in fifth grade math, and so I feel like I've gotten a little bit better handle on my timing of things and my planning and being able to manipulate the test to reflect my book a little bit better. And then using some tools to highlight and hone in on some specific skills. So I think that's a win. I would say one thing that I'm having a really hard time with is the 1, 2, and 3 bands. Looking at data from last year, I've got kids that missed only 3 and they got a band 2. And then I've got kids that missed everything but 3 and are in the same band. And so I'm really struggling with how efficient that reflects on the kids. And we talked at one couple of meetings ago about maybe using masked for grading, but if that's the data we're going to get, I don't feel like that's very reflective of my kids' performances. So I'd say that's a struggle.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Annie. So it sounds like you're talking mostly about the MAST in particular, right? And like how
Yep.
is it that we're getting kids,
Yeah.
how is it that there's this discrepancy happening?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a good person to reach out to for support from the OPI on that would be Tressa Gravely is her last name, or you can email assessment@opi.gov. But I can give you kind of a quick synopsis of how they explained it to our content specialist team was that there's some of the depth of knowledge on some of those questions varies. So a question might be harder than another question. And when you're seeing that discrepancy where maybe a kid just missed 1 and another kid missed 3, but they have different levels that pop out, it could be due to that depth of knowledge that they are experiencing when they take the certain test questions that they're exposed to. And then the other component that they shared with us at a recent training was that scale is like a long-term scale. So it's not, this is exactly where they're at, or sorry, it is exactly where they're at today. But we would still expect growth, right? There's still a lot of learning to happen because it's early in the year. So that's my quick analysis, just based off of what I've heard the assessment team say. But reaching out to the assessment team directly, would they be able to work one-on-one with you and coach you specifically on those results that you're seeing?
Thanks.
Mhm. Thanks for dropping those in, Eva. Yeah, so she just dropped the 2 email addresses that I
Oh,
mentioned
cool.
in the
Okay.
chat for you. Yeah. Thank you for feeling comfortable to share. And I know I don't have all the answers on that MAST assessment, but I'm glad to hear that that's what's being noticed in the field because it helps us when we're creating these resources to know that there's those gaps. Okay, so we're going to do the official check-in since everyone hopefully has had some time to sign on who's going to join us. So if you could take a moment and drop in the chat your name and when you hear the word fluency, what comes to mind? See an automaticity. It's a good word. With ease, comfort. That's a good whole child word there. Efficiency, smoothly, accuracy, flow smoothly. I like that one. Number sense. These are really good answers. In a snap. That's a good one. Effortless. Yeah, so I mean, basically it sounds like the theme here is our students shouldn't be struggling if they're fluent, right? Should be a general, maybe I should amend that and say they should be productively struggling, but not struggling so much that it's impossible. So that's a really good feedback there, and I think you all are right. I want to review this braided rope from our last session. So we talked about the proficiency strands that NCTM and the National Research Council have cited multiple times. This comes directly from the book Principles to Actions from NCTM, but this appears a lot on the internet. And there's basically those five strands that we talked about last time. There's conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, which is what we're focusing on today, strategic competence, adaptive reasoning, and productive disposition. And we typically see these first few items in the content standards. So you might see that there's a standard that works conceptual understanding, like engage in this specific task, add and subtract within 20, right? And then there might be standards that also include language related to fluency. So that standard might say accurately, efficiently, and flexibly add and subtract to 20. So we have this conceptual piece and this fluency piece kind of coming together. I'm going to give you all a moment to read. This is a definition directly from NCTM. This is how they define procedural fluency. And as you're reading, I'm wondering if you can pull out a piece of the definition that you feel like your students really struggle with. So I'm seeing knowing like the appropriateness of certain strategies, transference, modifying, a lot of these higher order kind of thought processes. Yeah, taking like rote procedures and applying them to context when we don't say this, we want you to use this formula or this algorithm is challenging. Michelle agrees. She would have said transference also, modifying. Yes, so that definition, I know we have a couple people like on cell phones, so I'll just read it real quick in case someone didn't get to see it. It says procedural fluency is the ability to apply procedures efficiently, flexibly, and accurately, to transfer procedures to different problems and contexts, to build or modify procedures from other procedures, and to recognize when one strategy or procedure is more appropriate to apply than the other. So those are all, I mean, in some way, shape, or form at different levels, hard for students to grasp. I kind of was trying to think of it as like a hierarchy. So I kind of threw these skills from that definition into the hierarchy. And we have these foundational pieces. They're that flexibility, accuracy, and efficiency. So can they do it in multiple ways? Can they do it the right way? And then can they do it the smartest way, right? Smart being relative, but those are the foundation pieces. And then we have these like extensions or expansions of fluency where they are asked to transfer that skill, adapt, and strategize. Which it sounds like from the feedback in the chat, these top three kind of tiers are where it's maybe the hardest for students. I'm wondering which of these skills you feel like are actually utilized in your curriculum, whether your textbook is your curriculum or whether it's things you've added in, but which of these skills do you feel like your curriculum helps you actually build with your students? Of any of them, Stephanie? Any of the six? I'm seeing a lot of mentions of strategy and flexibility, accuracy, some adaptability in there. Yeah, lots of ways to think about the concept. I think most textbooks, especially, are kind of moving toward, at least putting in these three. And then there's a lot of context. What you'll see in the standards is a lot of the standards will use explicit language in like K5 that really specifically mention these three words and then also require transferability. And then middle school, you'll see a lot of mix of all of these in the standards. And then in high school, you'll see less explicit stating of efficiency, accuracy, and flexibility, and more stating of, needing strategies, adaptability, and transference. That's a good point, Karen. It does depend on the class. Yep, using those 5 representations helps a lot. Um, so we're going to take a moment, and I've got 2 options. You can pick your path, pick your adventure, and there are 2 documents here. We're going to read. You can pick one of them to read, and then just we're going to share one powerful phrase that we saw. So I'll tell you, if you're on a cell phone, this 5 strands document is going to be easier to navigate on a cell phone. If you're a visual person, you like things in nice boxes, this one might be a little bit better for that. If you want something a little shorter and a little clear cut, the position statement is going to be good for that. And then this 5 strands one, we're just looking at pages 1 and 3. So Michelle just dropped both in the chat. I would like to ask you to pick one of them, and I'll give you a few minutes to just look it over and read it and highlight, copy, paste a statement that really stood out to you into the chat when you're done. I know a couple people just popped in. We are picking one of the links that Michelle shared just a moment ago. Maybe Michelle, can you share those again just in case they missed those? And then we're reading one of those documents and then sharing a powerful phrase from that document. Thank you, Michelle. See some of those answers starting to trickle in. Thank you. Angela, the comment you made really resonated with Eva and I just ran into this the other day, actually. We were looking at a visual model that neither of us had had experience using before. And even though we knew how to use the algorithm to solve the problem, like figuring out how the visual model worked and then how to explain that to students, and anticipate their questions was really hard for us. And we brought that up too, that, we played the game of school really, really well. We knew the algorithms really well. Um, but sometimes our kiddos that are really good at those they really struggle with that deeper, rich understanding. Thank you all for putting in these comments that you read that really resonated with you. That equitable learning quote came up a couple times. So we're going to move on. If you have ones you're still working on, drop it in the chat, feel free. But we're going to transition a little bit. So based off of what we read, we want to start to think about how this concept of fluency is related to proficiency, how they are, complementary. And if you have any ideas, you want to come off mute or put it in the chat, feel free to share out. Aaron's saying every student needs to learn flexibility and not just standard algorithms. That maybe that flexibility is the true indicator of proficiency, right? Great. Annie, I think you said it really succinctly and beautifully. Fluency leads to proficiency. Great way to say it. Yep. And it's one of those strands, right? I wasn't trying to bury the lead too much. I mean, there's the 5 strands, and procedural fluency is one big component of it. So there's definitely something that's going to lead to proficiency. Yep, fluency makes me think about doing things in multiple ways. When students have one set way, they don't necessarily have proficiency. Great thoughts put in there. Thank you. So some of you may have seen this one, but I wanted to cover some of the things that were necessary teacher actions defined by NCTM in that 5 strands document. So if you didn't look at that one, you would have missed these. But there's some things that NCTM recommends that teachers can do in order to build this specific part of that rope. They recommend offering a lot of procedure practice over time, using a lot of different methods of assessment in the classroom. So not just worksheets, is it correct? Which I think most of us on the call we know, but also making sure that we're assessing things like student discourse and entrance and exit tickets and actual assessments and, all those things as well. That we're empowering our students to look at errors and also analyze the strategies that they are seeing across the classroom for that efficiency component. We want to make sure that we're integrating games using those 5 representations that Karen mentioned earlier in one of her comments. We're using discourse, we're requiring precision. That's important to that accuracy piece. And that we're providing feedback that's grounded in what our students are actually thinking. And I have a tool for you guys on that one in particular in a moment toward the end. And it's not just about what we do. NCTM also defines some student actions. They have to meet us halfway. We can lead the horse to water, but we can't make them drink. So they need to be able to apply those procedures accurately in a lot of different contexts and to new problems and new things that are happening. They need to be able to be a little bit flexible in the strategies that they're using, be able to identify, use, and communicate multiple pathways, and then also kind of engage in that reflection practice and analysis on what they've done wrong and have that be okay, that kind of growth mindset piece. In the standards, if you're wondering, like, how do I identify whether it's a fluency standard or just a conceptual understanding standard, you'll see a lot of the time specific words. So you'll see these 6 specific words identified in the standard itself, but you also might see some, particularly in the high school, where they don't say adapt, but they might say invent strategies, methods, formulas, or something like that. So there is a little bit of variance. I would say K-8, it's a little easier to find those standards. When you get into high school, it can be a little bit more nuanced. But if you're seeing any of these explicit words or any of these skills, then you know it's a fluency standard. So we're going to practice that really quick. I have the QR code, and then Michelle just dropped the K-12 standards document in the chat. My recommendation is if you're pulling up the doc, we'll see if it works for me. Yep. This is a clickable table of contents. So once you find your grade level, if you just want to click on it, it should take you straight there. And the task is we're trying to find one of those standards that's a fluency standard within your grade level. There was a lot going on in the screen for a moment, but if you missed what I said, just take that K-12 document, find your grade level, and pull a standard that you feel is a fluency standard based off what we've been talking about. Stephanie pulled one about quadratic functions. She's seeing the strategic piece and this representation piece coming in. I agree with you, Stephanie. Yep, Angela pulled a strategy one as well. Yep, so if you're looking at Holly's example she dropped in, that's where I was talking about some of them use those specific words, so they're easy to find, right? That flexibly, accuracy, efficiently, strategies. Lovely. Pretty easy to find when we look for those words. Thank you, everybody. Here are some examples. If you didn't have an opportunity to pull that document, I know some people are not using their computer right now, so that makes it a little challenging with that small text. But if you needed to see something, here are some 4 examples across the grade band. So in grade 2, we have these specific words popping up, right? Same thing in grade 5. I wonder if anyone can point out why grade 7 is a flex. Let me back up for a moment. Why is grade 7 a fluency standard? What language is in that one? Angela, totally right. You pulled out some of those words. There's that accuracy and efficiency. Karen saw those too. Nice job, Stephanie. Yep. And Angela got that one too. There's that transference of skill, right? So we're hitting transferring it to context, which is one of those higher level ones that you all said, not all, but most said was one of the struggles that a lot of students have. We're having to interpret in that context. Yep. Yep. And then let's see, ninth grade, just reading it really quick. This one has that strategy coming in place, right? So these students are expected to solve systems of equations. There's multiple methods. So they're going to have to figure out which method's the most appropriate and use those both methods and strategies and the representations and technologies in strategic ways, which is actually a lot going on in that one, even though it's a tiny little text. All right, so then it kind of begins the question. Like we understand now, okay, we know what the fluency is, we know how to find them in the standards, but like why does that matter per se? How does that change what we do? And the answer is really that when we know it's a fluency standard, we can start to figure out how to create situations where students can build that fluency, right? And I'm going to show you some of those situations now. Um, we're going to look at this example first, and then we're going to go through some strategies. So here's some student work. And we've got 4 examples. I'm sorry if they're messy. I wrote them on the screen. You guys all know how that looks. It's embarrassing when your middle school students start to heckle you for it, but they're up here. And I'm wondering if you guys can look at them and see, in your opinion, which one shows the greatest flexibility. They're all the same problem. We're adding 38 by 25. So is A, B, C, or D, in your opinion, showing the most flexibility? There's not really a single right answer, so there's definitely a wrong one, but no single right ones. I'm seeing C's and D's. Does anyone want to tell me why, either off mute or in the chat, why C or D? Why'd you answer those ones?
I had just said C because it really shows that they have their number sense established, and so they can break things apart and put them back together.
Yeah, there's a lot of like decomposition happening, right, Holly? And then they're composing the numbers back. I agree with that. A lot of number sense there. We're seeing some, number line. That's an interesting observation. Yeah, that if they can do the addition problem using this strategy for D, then they probably have some baseline concept of maybe number line or like this idea of give and take being balanced. There's some algebraic thinking in D, I think, for sure. Adding subtraction into an addition problem. Yep. And then is there any strategy that seems to be like super efficient to you? A, B, C, or D? B. Yeah, most answers are saying B. I'm assuming it's because they only had to write one thing, right? They wrote a little +1 for that tens placeholder as they were adding. D could be done mentally really easily. Yeah, great comment there, Angela. Standard algorithms are usually standard for their efficiency, but not necessarily the ability to really know how it's happening. Yeah. And we didn't really like A. I didn't hear any answers for A, but if you were wondering, that one's just they're using place value. They're saying like 30 and 20. They did, it's very similar to C, but they just color coordinated it. Um, so that would be a student who's a little maybe more visual. But yeah, so there's a lot going on here. And if you were looking at these, what evidence do you see? Well, I guess actually we already covered this. So we said C shows a lot of like place value knowledge. We said it shows a lot of number sense. D is maybe bringing in that number line knowledge. Though they didn't draw a number line, they're demonstrating that they understand you can kind of take and give. A is using some place value knowledge, and then B is using knowledge of the algorithm. So I mentioned that we were going to discuss like strategies that we can use in our classroom that will help our students build this fluency when they're lacking it. I'm going to focus in on those specific, the like foundational pieces first. So accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility. To quickly summarize, if we want students to be accurate, we need to have that strong conceptual understanding and bring in representations, discussion, and then that requirement of precision so that they can have accurate and supported evidence for their observations that they're making. With efficiency, we want to have a lot of strategies available, but we want them to pick the one that is the most appropriate. And usually that has to happen through some sort of analysis or practice that's going to lead through automaticity. So some of you mentioned early on when I asked what came to mind when I said fluency, and you said automaticity or something, synonymous to that. So we start with that analysis piece and then hopefully get them to just know which strategy is the best. Flexibility, we're going to offer multiple entry points and we're going to encourage them to use different strategies or engage in strategic choice. Here are some strategies that build accuracy. So you might use visual models and manipulatives, you might use representations, games that self-correct. So I like those circuit tasks for that, right? Where if they get the wrong answer, they can't find the answer. So they know they made a mistake and now they've got to go back and try again. Asking questions like, how do you know, or can you prove it? So kind of prompting them, why do you know you're accurate? Doing some maybe writing tasks where they have to provide that evidence in writing. And then we also might require students to use units or encourage class discussions. Some strategies for efficiency, we might do some strategy sorting activities with them, challenges to find more efficient ways, reflections, games. We might bring in some of those number strings or visual pattern tasks with those 5 representations again. We might do mental math or estimation. Mental math is great for efficiency, but it can be kind of challenging for some of our students. So if you have an emotional component in your classroom that's going to make those mental math tasks a challenge for your kids, ishing, which is a Joe Bowler concept. I saw someone mention, I think it was maybe Angela said Joe Bowler earlier, but ishing can kind of help alleviate some of that anxiety in the students if you're trying to build that in. And then number talks, fluent use of tools and representations. And then flexibility, again, number talks. You'll notice a lot of these are, repetitive because they're building multiple skills at the same time. But visual models, open-ended problems, high floor, low ceiling, comparing and contrasting, and adaptive reasoning tasks. And then when we're trying to build all 3 and that expansion component, we'd be looking at some more, buzzword tasks, I guess, that engage multiple skills. So a lot of good examples of these are those 3-act math tasks, open middle tasks, number talks, those which one doesn't belong, estimation 180, number strings, math congress or gallery walks, always, sometimes, never, error analysis, and choice boards. And most of those are probably not new to anybody on this call, but good to have the reminder. If we're trying to assess our fluency in our students, so now we know, we know what fluency is, we know how to find it in the standards, we know how to teach it, because we already use a lot of those examples or strategies that I mentioned. But how do we actually determine whether they're fluent before we give them that MAST assessment or another assessment, right? How do we kind of gauge their level of fluency? And there's kind of a few different ways you can do this. I think it's important to mention that it is really hard as a teacher to every single time be looking specifically for that fluency piece when there's also so much to do, when we're assessing a standard. So I would recommend that if this isn't something you have already built, like if your school doesn't have proficiency rubrics and proficiency scales and all those things for every single standard already, then I would recommend just starting with the power or priority standards, or maybe the standards that, across the grade levels, you're all talking about a skill being missing. So maybe your fifth grade teachers are saying, wow, fractions are really troubling, right? And then down to third grade, you're looking at third, fourth, and fifth grade fraction standards or something. So that can kind of make this a little easier. Or you can also use it in response to those math data. So if you're getting misconceptions or you're noticing that students are struggling with specific standards, you could choose to assess or make a rubric for fluency on that specific component. So that's just kind of a reminder that it's not expected for you to have rubrics for everything all the time. The reality is it's hard. But here's some examples. So this example is more a reflection for a teacher. So this is low commitment. This is like, I know that there's a gap in fluency in my students, but I'm not quite sure yet where that's happening or what I can do about it. So I might look at these different components and I might start to ask myself as a self-reflection tool, can my students engage with flexibility and at what level? So I might say, most of my students are developing because they use familiar strategies, but they don't really make intentional choices. Maybe I have to do that. And then I would just use those reflection prompts to kind of think about, well, what are the conditions leading to that? Am I offering opportunities for multiple strategies, or am I stuck in a position right now where my curriculum or my time commitment is, kind of leading to more standard algorithm approaches? Or do I model and discuss relationships between representations? Is there an opportunity where I could do that a little bit more? So this is just a tool for your own reflection. Some schools will also make like an actual rubric based off of a standard that's tied to that fluency piece. So lots of different ways to make rubrics. We showed you some examples in the second session and the third session as well. But this is an example with this specific standard in mind with those three components. So we've defined that, and then we would assess a student's work kind of based this rubric. This is the one that I was kind of talking about where if this doesn't already exist, it's maybe more applicable to start it for standards that you're noticing on math that you want to work on, or standards that like K-12 or something across grade bands, you're having conversations about fluency being a gap. And then a high commitment or a medium commitment would be when you're looking specifically at those 6 components of fluency that we talked about earlier. So those foundational pieces and those expansion pieces. And then you define as a staff what that looks like for mastery, proficiency, developing, and then emerging. And then you would maybe even put in there what you would assess it, how you would assess it, I mean, and then what the output of the student work would look like. So these are just some examples to give you some ideas. This one's specifically only talking about flexibility. And the focus of this is, can a student choose among different strategies? So some action steps we can take are, as educators, we can try one fluency building routine. We can collect student evidence showing that they can engage in these skills. And we can start to reflect, which most of you are already doing, it sounds like, because there was a lot of good questions in there or responses in the chat. But we can also kind of pressure our leaders a little bit in our schools, or our leaders that are on the call here, can choose to facilitate PLC conversations around this topic. They can share those NCTM documents that I showed earlier, and then they can kind of audit to how the school currently defines these terms. And leaders have a school report and a district report on the mass that they could look at. So if the leaders on the call wanted to identify, across the grade bands, those standards that they really wanted to focus in on, that's another thing that they could do. And I wanted to show you guys a really cool tool that I found that I think is a game changer. I don't know if anyone has seen this yet. If you have, I would love to hear if you're using it in your classroom, because I've only been experimenting on my kindergartner with this. But this is a really cool app. There's a lot of stuff available for free on it. They do have a service plan that you can purchase as a district, but like I said, there's a lot available for free. It's called Snorkel, and it's an AI tool, but it's like a private coach for your class. I'm going to show you some things. So they have all these different grade levels, and it's not just for math, it's for all the content areas. You can click a grade level. They have a whole bunch of different tasks, and then they give the student a task, and the student has to record their response. And this is like a virtual workspace. So the kiddo can use a highlighter, marker. There's an equation tool in there. It does go all the way from kindergarten to calculus. And I don't know about the other calculus teachers in the room, but finding a little coach to help kids with calculus is really hard. And so I really appreciated, as I was going through the tasks for that, that was there. But they have to record their thinking, and then the AI tool will give them feedback. Oh, it didn't pull up this one. So it's not pulling up the full credit one, which is okay, because I actually wanted to show you, I did that task as if a student made an error. And you can see some of the feedback. They can click this and hear it, or they can read it themselves. The AI tool will tell them really positive things. And then when it says that there's a mistake, it asks it as a question. So it always says, can you look at Tara's method again, and think about what to do as this next step, right? So there's typically some guidance, but not an answer, which I really like. And then they get practice. They can go back and try it again. They rank them on a scale of 0 to 4. And if you have students who speak different languages, so you have some ESL students in your class, it will actually record they can record it in their own heritage language, and then it will create a translation for you as the teacher in English. So you can still get their thinking in their natural language that they're most comfortable with, which was really cool. We saw one with Mandarin, but so I just wanted to share that with you. Hopefully you can play around with it. But it really does, I think, a good job of helping students build that fluency one-on-one and giving them really good feedback. I want to ask if there was any kind of shifts in thinking about fluency from today as we wrap up. Or maybe something that was really affirming of your own thoughts also. That would be good to share. Yeah, Stephanie, I think that's totally valid. It's really hard to do it all, right? Like as teachers, I don't know, I don't have to say it to you guys, you all know, but it's so hard to do it all. And sometimes it is just um, easier to pick the path that you feel like the most students are going to understand, right? The strategy. Definitely easy to kind of panic about the time. I like the flexibility with efficiency. Reaffirming the importance of those multiple strategies. Holly, I think that's a really good comment because I think our students feel the same way, right? Like a lot of them, I think, are afraid maybe to try a different method or try a different strategy. They think that that maybe is might mean that they don't know what's happening. This comment about have how to teach students who just want to know the answer to just be a little patient is so hard. That's a hard skill. I think those open middle problems are really good about breaking that apart. So if you have any of those kids who just want the answer, the open middle problems give them the answer. They have to figure out how the answer was found. And there's usually a lot of different strategies to find those. So it can kind of deconstruct that thinking. Um, I think it's openmiddle.com if you want the website for it. But if you just Google open middle, the websites will pop up. Um, and the tasks are already made, so it doesn't require you to do anything extra as a teacher. Yeah, Heather, Joe Bowler's great. If you are not on the Joe Bowler train yet, you probably will be soon after you dig into that U Cubed website. But she does have a couple really good books that are available. And then she does do PD. I will say it's kind of pricey, but sometimes she'll like pop up in random places doing free PD. So I'd keep an eye out. Oh, Eva dropped the open middle thing in. Thank you, Eva. You're so great. Helpful. Looking ahead, we have some new sessions coming up soon. So next one, we're going to talk about curriculum alignment. So if one of the questions you dropped into the registration form was that you wanted to learn about how to align your curriculum, we're going to do that next. And then we'll have the assessment team come and we'll start to continue to do some of these topics. But I also wanted to mention that when we're done with kind of the standard training type, we'll do some specific needs and action planning and some more work with you all as you continue to engage in implementation. There's also some resources available if you want them. These are all linked in the participant form. They're also linked and available on the standards revision website. So you can access all of these. If you haven't heard yet, the kindergarten expanded document is available and we're almost done with grade 1. It's going through its final review process. If you haven't seen these or aren't aware, one of our really cool things that I'm excited to offer that we've never had before are these elaborations. And we'll have these for, I'm going to scroll really quick. Sorry for the headache. We'll have these for all grade levels K-12, and they will include the specific standard, the general notes. You'll see some instructional examples. You'll also see an EFA integration example for every single standard K-12. So they're not full lesson plans. They're more like, here's an appropriate context, here's an example of a task. And the idea is that as teachers, you would read that and go, oh, I can do it this way and this way and this way, and bring in all the things that you're already capable of doing, but have that kind of blueprint to get started. There's also some relevant resources that go with those EFA examples, and then a sample proficiency rubric for every single standard. And then our younger grades, K-5, will also have these vertical alignment pathways. So you can see how they kind of build. So kindergarten, you can see the pre-K standards that build to this kindergarten standard, and then the first grade standards. So you'll see where they're coming from and where they're going. And our plan is to make those for K-5. So that's available for kindergarten. And if you're not a kindergarten teacher, I feel like a lot of those tasks for EFA are still really good ideas that you can probably say, oh, I could, take this a little further and make it into a third grade task pretty easily. So if you're looking for stuff, I would check that out regardless, but those other grades will come as soon as we can get them out. And if you want any other resources, I have the Montana Math Minute every month. And this also usually has an EFA integration example with some resources and fun things in there, as well as announcements about professional learning happening across the state. And then any like classroom resources and things that I think people would benefit from. So as we wrap up, if you can fill out that feedback form, that would be great. That's your ticket to a PDU. And I will stay on if there's any questions or specific ways that I can help with the implementation work. But otherwise, thank you everybody for joining. And I hope that you got something out of this session that was helpful. Come say hi. Thanks for joining, Rachel. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. You'll have to let me know how that open middle website works out for you. Thanks, Angela. Have a good night. Hey, Eva, do you think you can stop recording? I don't see the button. I think I'm on a